The American escalation in Vietnam, arrival, and early strategy in 1965. The United States embarked on one of the most ambitious and controversial military campaigns of the Cold War, sending tens of thousands of troops to Vietnam under the banner of the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, MACV, backed by an arsenal of advanced weaponry, including B-52 bombers, helicopters, and napalm. The American public and military leadership alike expected that the Viet Cong would crumble under the weight of superior firepower. However, the dense jungles and treacherous swamps of Vietnam presented an unexpected challenge. Combat in this environment proved exhausting, costly, and frustrating, as U.S. forces rarely enjoyed the advantage of initiating engagements. By the summer of 1965, 50,000 American soldiers had landed in South Vietnam, signaling a major escalation aimed at preventing the North Vietnamese from overthrowing the South Vietnamese government. While the United States relied heavily on air power, the bombing campaigns, including the ongoing secret operations in Laos and the larger Operation Rolling Thunder targeting North Vietnam, largely focused on secondary targets rather than Hanoi itself. The overarching goal of President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration was not a conventional territorial victory, but rather to curb North Vietnam's influence in the South and prevent the collapse of its allied government. Political considerations constrained military operations, ruling out a full-scale invasion of North Vietnam to avoid provoking China, while limitations on cutting the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos and Cambodia complicated efforts to isolate the battlefield. These strategic considerations left the U.S. military with two primary approaches: conventional combat operations or counterinsurgency tactics focused on small unit engagement and political pacification. Although some advocated for counterinsurgency, General William Westmoreland prioritized the use of mobility, firepower, and attritional strategies to annihilate Viet Cong forces, believing that a relentless offensive could inflict casualties beyond North Vietnam's ability to replace them. The strategy would center on search and destroy missions, emphasizing kill counts over territorial control, marking a significant departure from traditional war metrics and laying the foundation for the statistical and body count-driven approach that would define the American effort in Vietnam. The strategy of annihilation, search and destroy operations. Westmoreland's vision of a rapid attritional war materialized through aggressive search and destroy missions, a tactical approach designed to bring the fight to the Viet Cong on their own terrain. These operations were methodical, moving village by village, hut by hut, and aimed primarily at targeting military-aged men suspected of Viet Cong affiliations. The American military, Under Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, implemented rigorous quantitative management methods inspired by corporate practices, seeking to assess progress through metrics and statistics rather than territorial gains. Every aspect of the war was quantified, from the tonnage of bombs dropped to the number of enemy combatants killed, with the body count emerging as the central measure of success. The Department of Defense emphasized offensive patrolling and preemptive engagement, hoping that overwhelming firepower and mobility would allow U.S. forces to decisively defeat Viet Cong units. Helicopters, particularly the UH-1 Iroquois or Huey, revolutionized battlefield mobility, enabling rapid troop insertions, extractions, and supply missions across South Vietnam's challenging terrain. Close air support, jet aircraft, and gunships like the AC-47 Spooky provided unmatched firepower, while new weaponry, including M16 rifles, M60 machine guns, and M79 grenade launchers gave American troops a technological edge over their lighter-armed opponents. Despite these advantages, the inherent challenges of the environment-dense jungles, swamps, and limited road networks posed persistent operational difficulties. Patrols were long and arduous, often resulting in physical exhaustion, disease, and stress, further complicating the pursuit of the Viet Cong. While large-scale engagements like the Battle of Ia Drong in 1965 initially appeared to validate Westmoreland's approach by producing high enemy casualties and a perceived 10-to-1 kill ratio, these early successes would soon be met with adaptive and resilient North Vietnamese tactics demonstrating that technological superiority alone could not guarantee victory. The enemy adapts, Viet Cong tactics and North Vietnamese strategy. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army NVA demonstrated remarkable adaptability in response to American tactics. Following the heavy losses inflicted during operations like Ia Drang, they shifted back toward guerrilla warfare, employing ambushes, booby traps, sniping, and mines as their primary weapons. These tactics exploited the difficult terrain and aimed to sap American morale rather than achieve immediate territorial gains. Mines and improvised explosive devices, in particular, were devastating, causing injuries as frequently as fatalities and forcing U.S. forces to divert substantial resources to medical and logistical support. North Vietnamese soldiers carried minimal equipment, relied on local civilian support for supplies, and often lived for extended periods underground in elaborate tunnel networks, maintaining both operational flexibility and safety from American firepower. Simultaneously, the NVA benefited from a steady influx of Soviet and Chinese weaponry, including AK-47 rifles, RPD machine guns, and rocket-propelled grenades, which enabled them to match U.S. firepower in squad-level encounters. North Vietnamese air defenses and fighter jets, such as the MiG-21, further complicated U.S. air operations, creating a tactical environment where patience, surprise, and careful planning often neutralized the technological advantages of American forces. The North Vietnamese leadership understood the limits of American political will, capitalizing on public opposition and fears of a protracted conflict in the United States to sustain a drawn-out war that favored their strategic patience. This combination of logistical efficiency, tactical ingenuity, and psychological insight allowed the Viet Cong and NVA to maintain operational effectiveness, forcing the U.S. into a costly and prolonged engagement with no decisive resolution. Combat realities. American soldiers in the jungle, war for American troops on the ground. The realities of combat in Vietnam were grueling and often demoralizing. Soldiers faced extreme environmental challenges, including disease, tropical heat, and the constant threat of wildlife and insects, while patrolling through dense jungles and swampy river deltas. Enemy contact was relatively rare, estimated at only 1% of patrols, but the omnipresent danger of mines, booby traps, and ambushes created a psychological strain that compounded the physical hardships. When engagements did occur, the Viet Cong frequently dictated the terms, striking quickly and withdrawing before overwhelming American firepower could be effectively deployed. Friendly fire incidents accounted for a significant portion of casualties, further complicating the operational environment. Additionally, U.S. soldiers faced equipment challenges. Early versions of the M16 rifle were prone to jamming and malfunction, while the M60 machine gun, though formidable, required heavy ammunition and was prone to wear and tear. Constant patrols, sporadic engagements, and the difficulty in distinguishing civilians from combatants created immense frustration among troops, with many soldiers reporting a sense of futility when encounters with the enemy ended in. These challenges, combined with high turnover rates among officers and the reliance on conscripted draftees with minimal training, contributed to widespread stress and declining morale within American units, setting the stage for operational difficulties and strained relations with the local civilian population. Civilians and the war. Violence, loyalties, and consequences. Vietnamese civilians bore the brunt of the war's escalation. Caught between American forces, the South Vietnamese government, and the Viet Cong insurgents, violence against civilians, intentional or accident, rose significantly as U.S. troops attempted to root out Viet Cong supporters, often perceiving local populations as hostile or complicit. This environment of uncertainty and fear created widespread resentment, and in many instances, reinforced support for the insurgency. Civilians experienced coercion and political pressure from the Viet Cong, which included forced labor, intimidation, and recruitment, while also facing reprisals from American and ARVN forces reacting to ambushes or casualties. Accounts from villagers such as La Lai Hayslip highlight the dual threats they faced, fearing the Viet Cong as secretive, nocturnal attacks while also suffering under the heavy-handed presence of conventional forces. The blurred lines between civilian and combatant in this asymmetric environment made distinguishing friend from foe nearly impossible, perpetuating cycles of violence and distrust. These dynamics not only exacerbated humanitarian suffering but also complicated counterinsurgency efforts, as American troops struggled to secure the cooperation of a population that viewed all parties with suspicion, ultimately undermining both strategic and moral objectives. Stalemate, miscalculations, and the limits of American strategy. By 1967, the war had reached a tenuous stalemate. While large-scale search and destroy operations inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy, the North Vietnamese strategy of attrition, combined with the resilience of the Viet Cong, prevented decisive American victories. MACV's reliance on body counts as a measure of success led to inflated estimates, with civilian casualties often being misclassified as Viet Cong, and critical qualitative factors like morale and popular support largely ignored. The U.S. underestimated the North's ability to replenish forces and sustain a protracted conflict, while bombing campaigns proved expensive and largely ineffective against an agrarian society with decentralized infrastructure. International opinion increasingly turned against the United States, as nations such as Sweden, India, and Japan publicly lauded North Vietnam's resistance. Domestically, public relations efforts by Westmoreland and Johnson attempted to portray progress, claiming a thinning of Viet Cong ranks and projecting optimism. However, the early months of 1968 would demonstrate the limitations of this strategy, culminating in setbacks such as the Tet Offensive, which exposed both the fragility of American assumptions and the resilience of the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces. The Vietnam War thus became emblematic of the difficulties inherent in fighting an asymmetric war in challenging terrain, highlighting the interplay of military technology, political constraints, and human factors in shaping the outcome of a deeply contentious and complex conflict.